Greetings and welcome to the Equity.Guru Investor Roundtable. Dude, we're going to talk about pot. And there are so many little companies that we're going to talk about today, and Vishal's going to launch us. Vishal is over there in the far corner, rolling a doob and handling the charts for us. Chris Perry directly above us, totally chilled out right now, dude. And over there's Galen. What are you doing, Galen, by the way?
I'm gonna phone the cops on my neighbors.
Maybe that's his fair play.
Vishal, throw out symbols as you go, just because I'm not going to go through the list you are. So let's do a little different today and start with charts, and then we'll get a reaction.
Sounds good. And I'm going to say something maybe controversial here, but it'll be great to hear what the panel says. But I'm going to say the cannabis bottom is in. I'm going to go out and say that according or just looking at the technicals. So, minus the fundamentals, and, we can debate about the fundamentals, but from a technical perspective, looking at the charts, it does seem like the bottom for cannabis is in. And I have the MSOS ETF here, which is the pure US cannabis ETF. And obviously, since February 2021, it's been quite the bad year there for cannabis. And I know a lot of cannabis bulls felt every single bump here going down, feeling that pain. And then recently, we talked about this actually on psychedelics and cannabis previous weeks, that there's signs of a bottoming happening here just on the charts. And I can say here, I have some technical indicators here or confluences indicating that the bottom is in. I've drawn a downtrend line, which, downtrend line, which can be extended further back. We have that breakout. We have a break above our resistance level. Some people are even calling this a mini cup and handle reversal pattern. So it just basically looks like that on profile, a cup. You have your cup body and then the handle sticking out there to the right. But the key trigger for me was this breakout, which happened on the 9th of February. Very strong breakout above our resistance level and our trend line. And now you can sort of see the trajectory that I'm hoping cannabis goes, or follows. So we've had a downtrend, and we're hoping now that we start a new uptrend. And 2 points here that I want to make here very quickly. First of all, you can see I have a trend line or an arrow pointing back to this 2325 zone for a retest, which I think is completely normal, just happens on breakouts. We do expect prices to pull back and retest. And the second point is, notice these 3 candles here that followed on the breakout. So this is a daily chart. You can see very, very choppy, a lot of ups and downs, no momentum. And yes, it might not be the greatest for a breakout. Obviously, you want to get that momentum right away or, as soon as possible. But I think given what's happening to the overall stock market these past few days with, the geopolitical tensions weighing in and putting pressure on stocks, seeing money, run into safe havens and into safety, leaving stocks, going into cash, I have to say cannabis is holding up very strong. What would make me basically neutralize my bullish outlook now on a technical perspective is obviously if there's some sort of fundamental issue, which I'm sure Galen and Chris will talk about in terms of maybe governments. But, on a technical perspective, if the markets do continue to drop, if they do weaken, and we do see MSOS actually drop back below the 2325 zone, so essentially the breakout is now nullified, that would mean that, sorry, cannabis bulls, but maybe the downtrend continues because there's no momentum on that breakout because of the overall market pressure. So it sort of sucks because, hey, it looks like it's going good, and then, maybe the Russians decide to invade Ukraine and it brings the markets down. But just quickly here, looking at some of the big boys here, Curaleaf, Canopy Growth, CGC, and I'm going to be showing the American listings here just because MSOS is a US listing, but obviously these can all be traded on the Canadian exchanges. But just quickly going through these charts, you're going to notice they all look very similar. So Canopy Growth, CGC, Tilray, TLRY, the same patterns, breakout, mini cup and handle, pulling back to retest. I also have Curaleaf, which is CURL, which actually looks maybe the best out of the bunch with a nice green candle close on that retest where buyers are stepping in at $8. We also have True Leaf here, green thumbs as well. And I guess, Galen, we can talk about Hexo and T-God, but you can sort of see very similar structure with a bottoming pattern after a very prolonged downtrend. So I'm going to say it, the cannabis bottom here technically looks like it's in. And I don't know what you guys think, but it's looking good to me.
Who wants to rebut first?
Sure, I'll go.
Okay.
No, Chris, you go. I know you're prepping to go.
I just think everything is trash and everyone is a thief, and nobody's really proved themselves on the cannabis side of things ever. If you take that chart that you're looking at and you roll it back to a 3-year chart,
Right.
To say anything is the bottom is, whew, I mean, you're working really hard to sort of suggest that now is the time, because look at how much downward there's been. Right? It's just, even when it's gone back up for a little bit on some news or some expectation that maybe the US government is going to change banking rules. Let me be really clear about one thing, right? If everyone's hanging on the US government updating its banking rules to allow cannabis companies to bank and have access to finance and thus become a real industry, right now the Democrats couldn't put through a bill to stop people from slaughtering puppies. They couldn't get through a voting rights act that everyone sort of agreed on. They couldn't get through infrastructure without giving a whole bunch of stuff away. They cannot pass a law without it being jammed in behind something else that everyone still doesn't agree on. So the idea that there's going to be some major change in the US to allow cannabis companies to do business, it's just not going to happen. Like, and that's not me just being a contrarian. Like, realistically, when's the last time you heard the U.S. government passed any bill?
Right. Yeah.
About anything? Like this, honestly, you could put a bill in place to say Betty White was a really nice person. It wouldn't pass right now because the Republicans won't pass anything. So any idea that cannabis is suddenly going to get a shot in the arm, it's not going to happen before the next election, and probably the next election after that, to be completely honest, because the US is a broken society. If you look at the share charts of various companies, and they sort of give that away. Like there's really no one who's streeting it, no one who's like turning the tide against everybody else. Tilray, okay, a little bit from $7 to $9 in the last month, but from $16 to $7 for 3 months before that.
Yeah.
Like, if you're bold and you want to say this is the bottom, more power to you. You might be right, but I'll remember that 3 years back, Equity.Guru was correct to the 2 days, calling the top of the historic cannabis market. 2 days. I posted an article. I said it's all going downhill from here. I got up on stage at Cambridge House, announced the room, sell everything, learn what it feels like to be rich. And we were right. It's been downhill ever since. Yes, there's been some ups. But you could draw a straight line from the 95% loss that has been from the top. So now we're looking at companies like Organigram, okay? One of the bigger companies, $600 million company in Canada. Has Organigram made a profit yet?
No.
Does anybody know? Like, has anybody made a profit yet?
I don't think so.
So what's the $600 million for? It's a license to lose money.
Yeah.
Like, are you grabbing market share? Okay. There is no company in Canada that has more than 30% market share. In fact, the top 10 have 30% market share, which means the rest has 60%, 65, 40, 70. So you don't have a Kleenex of this brand yet, right? You don't have a Budweiser. You've got a ton of small brands that are like making little incremental leaps to go from 17th to 16th to 15th. And you've got Canopy losing market share every quarter, despite the fact that it's worth billions of dollars. Tilray losing market share. Aurora cratering. organogram cratering. Like, why be in this business, right? It's a business that is hardwired for failure. You've got no limit on how many companies can be licensed to come into it, and Health Canada certainly doesn't give a shit about the health of the industry. You've got, at this point, about 400 different suppliers. Imagine if there were 400 banks in Canada, 400 different bank chains.
Yeah.
Like, what the fuck would you even say about that industry? You'd say that industry is a mess. But that's cannabis, right? You have 400 different companies, none of which make a profit, none of which are allowed to market themselves according to the rules. And yet people are like putting their life savings into this and saying the turnaround is coming. It's a big double for me. Like, you see the guys on Hexo. Hexo is underneath the dollar value it needs to be to maintain its NASDAQ listing, right? It's going to have to either roll back or it's going to have to go off the NASDAQ. It's going to be a monumental failure for that company. And yet you still see these unmitigated dickheads on Twitter who are clearly on the payroll. They're just pumping out 3 times a day. Oh, Hexo going up. Here it comes, here it comes. Hexo is a busted company. The only reason Hexo has any market share at all is because it bought it. And despite that, it goes down every month, right? So, I see guys saying Hexo is the lowest cost producer. Great. Fantastic. You know what else it is? Biggest loss maker. Every gram it sells, it loses money. Yeah, it's not spending much to make it, but somehow it still manages to lose. So if the lowest cost producer is losing money, what does that tell you about the rest? Cannabis is a wash. That said, there may be 1 or 2 companies that are worth looking at, but they're all in the bottom end of the market, the $20 million, $30 million companies. Those guys can, if they're selling the same amount of weed as the big guys, which they increasingly are, those guys have the ability to make a double, triple, quadruple on your money. The big guys, like, I don't know, what's Canopy worth these days? Like, having lost money every single quarter of its existence, having written off billions of dollars, it's still a $4 billion company.
Yep.
It's got the worst reputation in the entire business. There are people who've tried Canopy products and will never ever go back. And every quarter, their revenue drops as a result of that. Their market share drops. And yet it's still a $4 billion company. How is this even possible? Why is this? Come on, cannabis guys, like, get off your ass, buy some psychedelics or something at least. Psychedelics is also a ruse, but at least it's an early stage ruse. And there's an ability for you to make some money on it. Weed, it's just... Like, show me something different, weed companies.
How about this? How about, let's say, as a trader, would you say, though, cannabis is undervalued or undervalued?
Not even fucking close. Now I'm going to step in. No, it's not. It's still a completely fucking unreal market. It really is. You got analysts going, well, we're going to be at a $25 billion market size by 2025 in the United States. Then you got other guys going, no, it's going to be a $40 billion market. Then you got other idiots going, yeah, it's going to be a $70 billion market. They haven't got a clue. They're just pulling numbers out of their ass. And that's how it's...
It's how it's... Thing on all of that, even if they're right? You don't price your stock to the projection.
No, you don't. I mean, but the problem is we've been suckered into the whole meme stock philosophy. Oh my God, it's going to be worth so much one day. Thanks, Elon, asshole. Now, the thing is that the cannabis market at this point in time, legislatively, it's a mess. The United States has several acts that are on the table, the Safe Banking Act, the MORE Act, and about 3 or 4 others with, their own acronyms. And none of them made it past the Senate stage. They just sit there and they're going to die. Now, some of that's due to partisanship, absolutely. But otherwise, it's also due to the fact that it's just badly fucking legislated. Nobody knows how to deal with it yet. So the problem is also they've got all sorts of new things going on. The Delta 9, which is the popular sort of component of THC, has now been surpassed by Delta 8, which you can make off of hemp and don't have to be regulated, and it can sneak under the radar of most law enforcement. This is kicking the crap out of companies that are actually growing it in pot. That's a big problem. You've also got the fact that the market's saturated. We thought the world was going to open their doors and everybody and their dog was going to roll up a spliff and start smoking. The honest fact is that nobody who never really would smoke will ever smoke. That's just what it is. They're just not going to use it. It doesn't pertain to them. It doesn't do the things they'd like to do. And it has a lot of drawbacks. For instance, with Delta 9, memory loss, all sorts of interesting things that go along with it that nobody really wants to get into. So right now, you've got news stories in Eastern Canada going, we've got so many fucking dispensaries here, we don't know what to do with them anymore. There's one on every block. Every town has a dispensary now. And it's just ridiculous. You can't sell that. It's oversaturated. As Chris said, we got 400 companies. 90% of them are producing the product. Most of it's crap. And and it's also now starting to come to a point where it's costing less or being sold for less than the gray market, which I guess you could say, oh, great, it's all coming legitimate. Well, no, it's undercutting itself to death. We're just seeing the decimation of the market. It's all about consolidation right now and blood in the streets. So basically, I don't think we're going to see any kind of upturn, and it's not going to be a radical one because we already priced well above what the market was supposed to be in the first place, right? We're going to see it come down to a level and stay at that level. The growth is over. There's no growth left. Whatever growth was there was already preemptively bought into. And as you know, we've seen Canopy Growth, Tilray, the only companies that are billion-dollar companies that continue to make money that have cannabis on their roster, it's one small part, like Altria. They sell cigarettes, but they got a little bit of cannabis, but they're doing okay. You know what I mean? Budweiser, Anheuser-Busch, all Anheuser-Busch, whatever the hell that name is, they all continue to make a bit of money because it's not cannabis that they're really trying to sell. It's only part of their portfolio. Anybody that's got cannabis and cannabis alone on their billboard is pretty well destined to lose all their money unless, as Chris said, they're micro cap already. They found a small niche market. They service that, and they don't try to get outside of that.
Well, here's the group question before we go to ask. This will be great because it's the first time I think in months I get to ask the question this way. Will you put your money where your mouth is? And I'll be referring to Michelle since he was talking about bottoming out. But who are the two companies, Chris, that, or maybe it's not specific? Like what's an idea of the two or three that might actually be able to make some money for somebody?
Well, I think at this point you just sort of look at market caps and you say, who's in there at a market cap that doesn't scare me?
Like at a 40 million, 50 million instead of 2 billion?
Oh, God, yeah.
It just doesn't make any sense to go chasing $1 billion company and hoping it's going to double your money because now it's got to be a $2 million company. Unless they're, dominating the industry. Look, annual earnings to share costs for the big guys. Aurora Cannabis loses $1.73 per share per year and is currently at, what's it at? $5.50. So at that rate, you've lost your entire market cap in 3 years. Growth. Your Canopy's worth $4.2 billion. It loses $1.16 a share, and it is currently at $10. Right? Like,
jeez.
When you're losing 10% of the stock value every year just from your losses, and you're not actually growing your market cap any, like, why would you still be worth $4 billion? By my thinking, Canopy should be worth $400 million, 1/10 of where it currently is, right? Now, if Canopy was trading at $1, I might say, well, they're big enough to turn it around, go for it. But they're trading at $10, right? And people are out there like swallowing their bullshit that because they're big, they're going to get bigger. It doesn't work that way. They're already big. Mm-hmm. If you want to double your money on Canopy, it has to become an $8 billion company. If you want to double it on Emerald Health, well,
you shouldn't be investing in Emerald Health to begin with.
But it's going to become a $22 million company, right? Like it's at 5.5 cents. It needs to go to 11 cents to double your money. Take out of the account that Emerald Health is terrible, but it's a lot less heavy lifting to do the double on those small companies. Tilray, $3.8 million. Like, is it going to get to 7 before, let's say, my computer is giving me grief, but T-God is T-God is a $60 million company at 12 cents. Mm-hmm. Like if you say, okay, well maybe T-God can get 24 cents, maybe it can. It might also go down to 6. So for me, I'm just like, my general theory is like you invest in the small guys that have a reasonable chance of doubling. If anyone else is like, well, they have to fix some things, or it's dropping, but maybe this is the bottom, there are better places to put your money. Go read up on resources. Go read up on biotech. Like, you don't have to. You can be a cannabis fan. You can be really supportive of the cannabis industry and not lose your life savings backing cannabis companies that are heading downwards.
All right, Michelle, the gauntlet has been thrown at you.
Yeah, it has. Chris just mentioned resources. That's obviously the space that I really like. I do like the cannabis, the precious metals and commodity space. So I think.
Oh, I'm sorry, sir. This is not a precious metals episode of the Roundtable. So please try to.
Yeah. So
that's like
let's say this.
Porn fans wanting to switch it over to a porn conversation. No, we're talking about pot.
I'm going to say this. I'm going to say as a trade, just as a trade, I do like what I'm seeing here as a trade, as a technical. So just because I have confidence in the technicals, I'm going to say I'm going to put down 2K here in MSOS as a trade. If it does break back below, the 22 or 23, 25 zone here, if that happens, I would be getting out. But I think just as a trade, the technicals look good. And cannabis is actually surprisingly holding up well given what's going on in the stock markets right now. So I see that as a positive sign that we are maybe breaking out and getting a bit of a trade here. And hey, if the whole Russia-Ukraine thing blows over and the markets do actually begin to tick up higher, I think that's going to be enough for anything with a breakout to basically get that momentum, because you will see more of that, I guess, retail crowd and the speculation money come back in. So that's what I'm going to stick with. I'm going to say 2K here in MSOS, and given those parameters, when to get out and when to get in.
All right. So what happens if there is a war, people decide to smoke more dope or take more edibles? Like, that's their way of dealing with the stress, etc. Do I even need to ask you two guys if you're spending any money, or am I just wasting my time?
Chris has already made it well clear that he's not spending a dime, and neither am I. The purse strings are really tight on this one. I'm not fucking going anywhere near it. I think it has, I don't know if it has a long way to go, but I don't think it has enough growth potential for me to even be interested at this point. I still think the bottom has yet to arrive. There might be some interesting plays in terms of smaller companies that do niche markets and then just stay within those markets, but it's not worth my time. I'd rather find something else that I think that has more growth potential, as in biotech and other areas that I think can actually do some multipliers, rather than just eking up like 25% and then staying there. It's a sustainable industry, but it's nothing that I'm going to cheer about because it's already been blown out of the water by speculation.
It's commoditized, right? It's done.
Yeah.
Growing weed isn't profitable in Canada, where the rules are what the rules are. The big companies have had a couple of years now to try and lobby the government to change the rules and make it a bit easier for them to do so. And they've decided to just stick to their own knitting and leave it to other people. They've had a chance to go and do clinical trials to make it more of a biotech play. They haven't done so. There's more clinical trials going on in psychedelics than there are in cannabis. So really, to me, this is just a massive sell-off. It's like the end of blockchain, right? Mm-hmm. There are still people that are like, blockchain's going to come back because blockchain is really useful. Yeah, it's useful. It's just not a business. Yep. Blockchain and something else is a business. Blockchain and banking is a business. Blockchain and medical records is a business. Blockchain by itself is not a business. Cannabis and medications is a business. Cannabis extract in Wonder Bread, that'd be a business. It's not allowed, but it'd be a business. Getting the good parts of cannabis into kids who require it would be great business. It's not allowed by the government. So instead we're going to say, well, the US is coming. The US is where it'll be at. Newsflash. The prices are up here because of what was supposed to happen in Canada. If it hasn't happened in Canada, but it does happen in the US, that's just a straight line, right? That's not now everything goes to the moon. It's a shitty business because the government made it a shitty business. and they held it up long enough that the Americans are now
Yeah, I don't know if the government can be all to blame for that. I think it's just a shitty business because of the speculation that went out of
the
control.
government could have got the legacy producers who've been doing it for 10
Yeah,
years.
sure, whatever, but it's still not going to increase the
system.
market share that they presently have. It's already a going concern. That's the problem. Advertisement's not going to make any big changes. The people are smoking it.
Totally would.
Nah.
Look, we were talking back in 2016, we were talking about bus trips for senior citizen homes, going to smoking lounges and getting their weekly medications. None of that's happened. We were talking about insurance companies getting into cannabis. None of that's happened. We haven't had enough law changes or progress. Remember the cannabis breathalyzer that was a year away from happening 5 years ago? Hasn't happened yet. Just too much bullshit.
Yeah.
Well, the science was bullshit.
Yeah, look, the science is bullshit, but so too was the government response to it all, right? There's too much hand-wringing, not enough acceptance that it was real. Look, I'm quite happy to use weed. I don't want to smoke it. I'm not interested in smoking it. I'm not going to dab. I'm not going to vape, realistically.
Edible.
What am I going to do? I'm going to pop a chocolate after dinner. I'm going to take a pill.
Yeah, and there's already companies out there doing it, so you can go get your stuff. So it doesn't matter what the government does at this point. I think it's a bit. I think it's not. I think it's a bit belly aching at that point. Milk's already spilled, man. The business fucked up. The business shat its pants. Wasn't the government.
The only way I can get myself a weed edible is to go to a dispensary. That's the government's doing, and I don't want to go to a dispensary every fucking day. I don't want to be limited on how many products I can carry out. I don't want to be in a situation where I have to spend 5 minutes trying to open a fucking bag because the government rules mean that I have to have 6 fingers to do it. Like, it's if it was just an industry, if they just said it's an industry and yeah, we know the Hells Angels were behind it before and we know they'll probably get into it again. But, hey, we've got to grow up at some point. Open the doors. Man, half the population would be using cannabis-based products, right? Products, not weed. They wouldn't be going and buying flour. They wouldn't be smoking up. They'd be using beauty products with stuff in it. They'd be using...
They're already doing it with CBDs, man. You don't need the THC for that.
CBDs doesn't do what CBDs were sold to do. And in order to really get the CBD effect, you need THC, which isn't allowed with the CBD products. Like, it all comes back to the same thing. By the time they figure it out in Canada, by the time it's figured out in the US, they'll be bringing it in on shipping containers from Kenya. It'll be $1 a pound, and there's no more business in Canada. So, sorry to be the bearer of bad tidings. There are a couple of small companies that I'm watching that, if things start to turn around for them individually, I'll be all over. But as an industry, cannabis is exactly where I said it was going to be 3 years ago.
All right, people. You can do your own research. You can read. That's all we're going to tell you.
Yep.
I don't think I need to do any disclaimers, but I will do it anyway. Past performance does not guarantee future results, nor does anything that we say. But chances are. Chris Perry upstairs, Michelle over there, Galen over there. Start pouring the whiskey. See you on the next edition of the Equity Guru Investor Roundtable.
Bye.